Uh, Good afternoon, and thank you so much to everyone here. It's been a pleasure, and I hope everybody's ready for a really interesting afternoon. I hope you had some coffee, maybe. I haven't had much time today for even eating, but so I am here in the LATI Center, and behind me is Alba Toledo's painting, just for you to know that we are here and we are present, and hopefully in the future we will be celebrating in person. So this part of the colloquium is dedicated to creative writing and performance in a lovely range of formats, by Latinx writers. First of all, let me introduce you to our beloved professor, Dr. Ethan Bumas of the English department, who will moderate and introduce a panel of 3 writers reading their own personal essays. The title of this panel is Creative Writing in Our America, and it presents several snapshots of Latinx life in Hudson County, and it's a video. A little bit about Dr. Bumas. I had to really shorten his amazing curriculum. He writes criticism, fiction, nonfiction, hybrid, and translation, and volunteers with prison writers. He has also received many, many grants from the National Endowment for the Arts, the Humanities, the Fulbright Commission, the New Jersey State Council for the Arts, among many, many others. Dr. Bumas has taught in the NJCU English department for almost 20 years, and we are very lucky to have him as a colleague and as a professor. And please welcome him and his wonderful, talented writers. David David, are you going to play the video? Because I have very bad connection.
Yeah, maybe. Well, Chris, could you play it, and then if yours doesn't work, then I'll play.
Carnutzos has very weak connection today. Thank you.
Today's panel, Writing Our America, comes to you from Lenape country, where most of the true stories you will hear take place. We offer our respect and thanks to the Lenape people. I'd like to thank my colleagues at the Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies for organizing this conference and allowing Marie Garcia, Justin Hernandez, Crystal Reyes, and me to participate. In particular, I'd like to thank Cora Lagos, David Blackmore, and Virginia Ochoa Weinmiller for the hard work when, like the rest of us, they're busy surviving the pandemic. Well done, people. And thanks to everyone who is stopping by to visit our panel. You're in for a treat. The Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies has a good long name. I guess we could call that the CLACLS or the Clackles, but that's like having rocks in your mouth, and I would prefer saying LATI, as in the logo LATI. Today's works begin in Latin America before coming to our part of Lenape country, the southern parts of Hudson County, Jersey City and Bayonne becoming Latinx. I also like saying that name, Latinx, and though I will remind you of the history or evolution of that name, I'll admit that group names, like the naming we do in our writing, are in flux. According to the National Endowment for the Humanities, New Jersey City University still is a Hispanic-serving institution. That sounds awful colonialist. Hey, you there. Hispanic. It sounds like we are busy othering other countries right here at home and ourselves. I think Hispanic comes from Hesperia, which was how the Romans referred to that western peninsula that was surely as far as land could go. Iberia. I would hate to forget that there are other languages from pole to pole in the Americas. By one estimate, there were 3,000 languages in the pre-Columbian Americas. According to the Language Conservancy, there are now 60% fewer languages in what is the US than after the Revolutionary War. Now more people speak English than speak Mandarin. In the 20th century, people used the phrase Latinos. Then there was Latina O, which we still use for our Latina O literature course. That's Latina/O, and it made a cooler lit class title than U.S. writers of Latin American descent. There was resistance. How to pronounce the slash? Latina/O? Latina/O? I, for one, particularly like plurals referring to people crushed together into the @ sign, made famous in email. Someone influential had read The Second Sex. It was cool to write, and it stopped our amigos from eclipsing our amigas. But, again, how would you pronounce the @ sign? Now I dig Latinx. X is such an underused letter. Just count the number of alphabet books with xylophones, X-rays. And I like it because X is such a Nahuatl letter, transliterated. I think of Xochimilco, that improbable place near Mexico City, another X, a town which somehow managed to go unincorporated during the Spanish conquest and colony of New Spain. Rodrigo Lazo says Latinx is mystery. What's X? What is X if X squared equals A squared plus B squared? As that equation implies, X is lots of different people. Unknowable, unstable. Latin and African, Latin and indigenous, Latin and Jersey. Even ahead Proud Boy. X is the treasure on the pirate map. X, as Richard T. Rodriguez said, marks the spot. Many spots today. The spot just so happens to be Hudson County, New Jersey, Lenape County, where all three of our writers live. Our panel's name, Writing Our America, is mostly a salute to Jose Marti's famous essay of anti-U.S. hegemony and pan-Latin Americanism, Nuestra America, Our America. However, whereas that essay addressed the vast expanse of land from Cuba to the southern cone, our work, Our America, is right here. The paths these writers walk, drawing their own cities. These writers' Americas are less about their governments than about their families, but as we write our America, we create it. Today, writers will read their wonderful personal essays begun in Creative Nonfiction Workshop. Students read 2,000 years of essays and somehow came up with their own personal subjects and styles. There will be three writers, Justin Hernandez, Marie Garcia, and Crystal Reyes. When they're done, they will talk with you. I hope you have questions so we can have a dialogue. Our first reader is Justin Hernandez. Justin is an English major in the literature concentration. His essay, Emendation.
Hello, I'm Justin Hernandez, and this is my essay, Emendation. My father is a good man. He was born on a farm in El Salvador, the first child of a soon-to-be large family. His father owned myriad acres of land, and owned even more animals to populate this land. My father loved these animals, the natural surroundings of his place of birth, and my grandmother. She was the light of his life, teaching him to care for the land, the animals, and his brothers. Life was simple for my father, but he cherished this simplicity. One day, his father suddenly uprooted his simple life. opting to move my father and uncles to the United States. The simple life my father had known was left behind in El Salvador without explanation, along with my grandmother. My father faced many of the common challenges for young immigrants. He struggled to adjust to life in Jersey City, and, as the oldest of 3 boys, had to watch over and protect his brothers as they struggled to adjust as well. His father, a once well-off farmer, took up multiple time-consuming, low-paying jobs to support a tiny apartment and his sons that crowded the place. He refused to sell off the land he owned in El Salvador. His greed made him hold on to it for decades, waiting for its value to rise. Meanwhile, my father and uncles had to share a single, rusted toddler's bicycle that they found abandoned at a park. Despite the stark contrast to his life in El Salvador, my father made the best of his new life in Jersey City. He grew to love the tiny apartment, the bond he built with his little brothers, and a girl he met in high school. The couple eventually got their own apartment after graduating, and they made plans to save money while they worked and went to college to build a family and live in a large, comfortable house. However, these plans were complicated when my mother became pregnant with my older sister. My father immediately dropped out of college and began working full-time as a truck driver to support my mother and sister. He and my mother both worked to get their plan for a large family and a comfortable home back on track, but this was again thwarted by my arrival. My parents fast-tracked their plan as my mother also dropped out of college to begin working full-time. My father resented the thought of me and my sister not having a comfortable home to grow up in. He and my mother targeted a modest home on the corner of McAdoo Avenue in Jersey City to move into. A couple of months after purchasing the home, my mother again became pregnant with my younger sister. My father took up another full-time job, driving trucks for a different company, as he set his sights on purchasing a larger home for our growing family in Bayonne, Jersey City's slightly more spacious and suburban neighbor. When I was 7 years old, my father uprooted our family and moved us to the house of his dreams. I had mixed feelings about the move. Our new home was bigger and much nicer than our previous home, as it boasted a driveway, backyard, and multiple floors. I had my own room to sleep and play video games in, along with my own bathroom. And, most importantly, I had an attic to store all of my toys in. On the surface, life couldn't get better. However, I wasn't happy. With more privacy and comfort came more isolation. I became very lonely. Kids at my new school saw me as the chubby, quiet nerd that sits in the back of the classroom reading books and playing video games. At home, my sisters cut me and my Star Wars action figures from their playtime with their Bratz dolls. They would play together at one end of our huge attic, while I played alone at the opposite end. My mom balanced her job with cooking for, cleaning after, and helping to teach me and my sisters. She rarely had time for play. I found myself looking to one person to play with me, my dad. For my 11th birthday, I begged my parents for the Lego Star Wars Slave One, my favorite character, Boba Fett's spaceship. I had an abundance of Lego Star Wars sets, all of which I built myself and played with alone. My mom threw me a Star Wars theme party, complete with plates, napkins, and a cake with Darth Vader on it. She spent the entire day decorating and cooking for the party. My dad was working, but arrived after everybody had left with the Lego I desperately desired. I was ecstatic that both he and the toy were there, and excitedly asked him to build it with me, to which he responded, "I've been at work all day to pay for this whole party. I don't have time to play with your toy. One day, you're going to throw it out anyways. That was the last time I asked my dad to play with my toys with me. For my 12th birthday, I asked for Mortal Kombat to play on the Xbox 360 console I got for Christmas the year before. Mortal Kombat is an excessively violent fighting game in which each match is finished with a fatality, a gory killing animation done to gloat over your opponent. I wasn't a big fan of the game, as I saw the violence and gore as unnecessary and overkill, but my dad liked it. He and my uncles used to play the original version of Mortal Kombat in an arcade near their tiny apartment in Jersey City when they were growing up. When I was 5, they bought an updated version to play on my GameCube, and I cried when I saw them perform a fatality for the first time. At the age of 12, I felt ready to play the game, just to spend time with my dad. As usual, he arrived home from work late, but with my gift. When I asked him if he would ever want to play it with me, he told me, "I don't have time to play video games, and neither should you. You're growing up, and you should be going outside more." That was the last time I asked my dad to play video games with me. For my 13th birthday, I told my parents I didn't want anything. I had plenty of toys and video games from years past, and had become increasingly aware of our financial situation, which had become a great strain on our family. When further pressed for something I wanted, I asked for a pair of Nike LeBron 10s, a pair of basketball sneakers that I could wear for the upcoming season, any social events I went to, and even my 8th grade graduation. I had been wearing a pair of cheap, old Nike Hyper Enforcers for over a year, and was sick of being the butt of jokes at the local basketball courts for the multitude of holes and rips on my sneakers. This birthday fell on a Saturday. I was hopeful that my dad could find time in his off day to play a game or two of one-on-one with me in our driveway. When I was younger, he and my uncles would always play basketball with me during family gatherings, and he seemed to enjoy these small games. After being presented with my new sneakers, I countered with this suggestion, only to be unsurprisingly and hurtfully denied. As my father said, "This is my only free day of the week, and I don't want to spend it playing that stupid game. You need to stop wasting your time with that and go get a job." That was the last time I asked my dad to play basketball with me. For a while after being repeatedly rejected, I hated my dad. Throughout grammar and high school, I took note of the relationships my friends had with their fathers, and I became jealous. I longed for the connection they had. I longed to go to the movie theater with my dad. I longed for my dad to split screen on my video games and play online with me. I longed to go to a basketball game with him. I felt like I was a disappointment. I did everything I could to gain his approval. I gave up toys and video games and basketball. I lifted weights and gained muscle because he likes to work out. I got a job at a local tuxedo shop because he said I should start working and saving money, but it was never enough. When I stopped playing basketball, I was a quitter. When I began lifting weights, I was doing it all wrong and should just focus on school. When I got my job, I was wasting my time working a part-time, minimum wage job and should try to get an internship instead. I didn't understand why my father treated me the way he did until the fall 2020 semester. In September, I found myself learning to balance a new 9-to-5 job, the most difficult semester of my college career thus far, and financial struggles. Every day, I was surrounded by deadlines, assignments, and bills. Every night, I swallowed 4 melatonin pills after barely completing assignments on time in order to get a maximum of 5 hours of sleep, either because I had to be up at 6 a.m. for work the next morning, or because my heart was racing out of anxiety for the hospital bills that had been plaguing me for months, for a small gash I got on my lip lifting weights at the beginning of the year. My once strict gym routine had been foiled both by time constraints and COVID-19. I couldn't stop gaining weight as my diet was decimated by the fast food that I scrambled to pick up and eat during work breaks and between classes. I finally understood the exhaustion and bitterness that accompanies adulthood. Yet, every time my girlfriend and her 6-year-old sister FaceTime me at 7 a.m. on my only day off of the week to invite me to a morning tea party, I jumped out of my bed and rushed to their small apartment to play the butler role to the best of my ability. Sharing imaginary tea with their pure smiles is one of my life's true delights.
And Justin, our next true story is Marie Garcia's Lessons in Disguise. Marie is an English major in the creative writing concentration. Marie.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marie Garcia, and today I will be sharing with you a paper I wrote titled Lessons in Disguise. Lessons in Disguise. I didn't realize how toxic my parents' relationship was until it began to mentally affect me. I felt like I was stuck in a time loop, almost as if I were repeating the same day over and over again. Dad would get caught cheating, Mom would start yelling, and then they'd act as if nothing ever happened. I learned to present a mask of indifference to the rest of the world, but once I came home, it slipped right off. My parents never noticed. They were too busy arguing with each other. Most of my childhood was spent on trying to distract myself from their destructive relationship. I would play music on my headphones or watch television and raise the volume to the highest setting just so I could drown out their expletives. Their fights were mainly verbal and consisted around the same thing. Go to hell, you fucking asshole. What bitch are you talking to now? Is she why you can't pay rent this month? Dad would deny every word, even after my mom checked his phone. She's just a friend, he would say. Although they didn't put their hands on each other, there was one incident where my dad falsely accused my mother of cheating. She was texting her male coworker, and he threw her phone across the room, shattering it into pieces. I was in cheer practice when this occurred, but my mom tearfully called me from her house phone to tell me. When I left practice early, Dad had already left for work. I consoled my mom on her black leather couch, holding her in a tight embrace as she cried on my shoulders. For every tear she dropped, I felt my world collapse. My best friend Rachel was the only one who knew about my family issues. In fact, she had personally witnessed one of my parents' fights. I had invited her to my house when one of their arguments ensued. I cried the whole time, not knowing if it was out of sadness, anger, or embarrassment. My parents never noticed. They were too busy arguing behind closed doors. I'd stay at Rachel's house after school, finding any excuse to get out of the house. I felt envious of her stable family. Why couldn't I have that? It was very selfish of me, but at the time, I wish I had a sibling by my side who experienced the same thing I was going through. At least then, I wouldn't have felt so alone. I've always had a close relationship with my mother. Her parents also had a toxic relationship, but her father was physically abusive. She would tell me stories about how she begged her mom to leave him, but my grandmother never did. I wonder if she ever realized the irony. Aside from the fighting, I thought of my mom as my savior. She stayed by my bedside whenever I felt sick, taught me how to ride a bike, and constantly reminded me that she loved me. I never got any of this from my dad. Any memory I have of him is tainted with lies and neglect. Looking at my mom's soft brown eyes, curly black hair, medium complexion, and small upturned nose, I questioned how anyone could hurt her. My father was average looking, pale skin, lanky figure, bushy eyebrows, and large wide nose. She was completely out of his league, and yet he managed to turn her life completely upside down. Before my mother and I came into the picture, there was Nicole, my father's ex-wife. She had a plump figure, wavy black hair, fair skin, and a devilish smile. From what my dad mentioned years ago, Nicole tried to stab him with a knife when she caught him lying about his location. They divorced soon thereafter. There were two events involving Nicole that I distinctly remember. The first occurred when I was about 10 years old. Nicole stood outside our apartment window, dressed in a tight-fitted skirt with knee-high boots in the 40-degree weather, looking to get a rise out of my parents. My mother called the cops and commanded me to stay upstairs. When the police arrived, both of my parents went downstairs and reported Nicole for harassment. I stayed where I was, confused and afraid. The incident didn't last more than 30 minutes. When my parents returned, everything seemed back to normal. The second event transpired 1 year later. My mom and I were walking on the sidewalk headed towards Payless when she noticed a familiar red truck following closely behind. We entered the store, and lo and behold, Nicole walked in. This time she brought company. Her daughter Vanessa, my half-sister, and one of Nicole's friends trailed behind her. They, and by they, I mean Nicole and her friend, wasted no time harassing my mom, calling her a puta, which translates to bitch. I watched in fear and uncertainty as they took snapshots of her on their flip phone cameras. I didn't know what to do. My mom didn't tell me. I stood behind her, hoping someone would protect us. Either nobody saw us or they didn't care. My mother threatened to call the cops. The only reason she hadn't reported this altercation yet was because she didn't want Vanessa to see her mother in handcuffs. They eventually left, but not before Vanessa's earnest farewell, which mainly consisted of a few more insults directed at my mother. I was deeply shaken. Vanessa barely glanced at me, and yet I felt like I was the one being attacked. I thought my mom would mirror my emotions, but she just appeared irritated. I guess I didn't have anything to worry about. My father had 4 children with Nicole, including Vanessa. We didn't start off with the best relationship. I've always known about their existence, but I never considered them as siblings. We didn't grow up together, nor were we ever properly introduced. Since our mothers hated each other, there was always an unspoken tension between us. Vanessa, in particular, strongly disliked me. I was about 14 years old when I found a note in the back of my dad's car that was addressed to me. I don't remember the exact words, but Vanessa claimed I wasn't a part of her and my dad's family, and she also called my mother a whore. Who could hold so much hate in their heart for someone they barely even knew? A deep part of me had always longed for a sister. I secretly hoped to form a bond with my siblings, but to have it thrown back in my face simply crushed me. It took a couple of years for me to realize why Nicole and Vanessa hated my mom so much. I was in the mall with my older sister Scarlett, and Nicole's name was brought up during our conversation. It's easier to explain the situation if I break down my family dynamic. Scarlett's dad, Nelson, is my mother's brother. Scarlett's mom, Jessica, is married to Nelson. Jessica is my mom's sister-in-law. They're also close friends. Several years ago, Jessica was friends with Nicole. During this time, Nicole was married to my father, and I didn't exist. My mother was then introduced to Nicole and her husband, my father, by Jessica. When Scarlett told me this, everything clicked together. My parents had an affair. Nicole didn't seem so crazy after I learned the truth. At first, I refused to believe it. My mother spent years getting cheated on. She couldn't have been the other woman. However, everything added up. It was like the missing piece of the puzzle, and my parents left me with the remains. Moving on to my other siblings, there was the oldest Alex, whom I still never met. The only thing I know about him is that he's a journalist who used to work for Complex magazine and that he beat throat cancer 5 years ago. Ever since that moment, my dad encouraged all of us to get along. I guess he realized it was time to hash things out. Q and the twins, Mark and Stephanie. They're 2 years older than me, which makes me the youngest out of everyone. About 4 or 5 years ago, my dad set us up to meet at a diner. We just spoke to each other as if we were a couple of old friends. There were no talks about cheating fathers or vengeful mothers. We spoke about school, our main interest, and goals. There was no hostility in the air. I don't remember the full conversation, but I do remember feeling happy. For once in my life, I didn't feel isolated. We kept in contact through the years, and Stephanie even got me my first job. From then on, we grew closer and ended up sharing stories about our dad. She admitted that he stopped talking to them for 1 whole year, and they struggled to pay bills, almost losing their house in the process. Stephanie also confessed to feeling slightly jealous about my relationship with our dad. I couldn't have been more shocked. Little did she know that I envied her place. For years, I had to endure my parents fighting and resented my dad for the hurt he put me through. I would always be the one picking up the pieces he broke inside her. In fact, there was a long period of time when I thought I hated him. How could you love someone who causes you so much pain? Soon I'd realize I'd have to move on. Death, or in my case, near death, really brings people together. Last year, my father suffered a heart attack. I was at work when Stephanie texted me the news. It was a busy night. Customers were coming and going, but I couldn't follow their movements. I was stuck in place, struggling to remember the last conversation I had with my father. Did I tell him I loved him? My manager noticed my disorientation, and when my shock finally faded, I explained the situation. He let me go immediately, and I rushed to the hospital. Mark, Stephanie, and Nicole were already in the waiting room when I arrived. It was the longest 20 minutes of my life. When the doctor came out, I feared the worst, but fortunately, they were able to save him mere seconds before his heart gave out. A miracle, he explained. I watched as my father's still body came into view. He lay in bed, hooked to the machine, eyes closed, and pale as a ghost. I couldn't stop staring. In that moment, he looked so fragile and vulnerable. Tears stained my cheeks. What if he didn't come back? Despite everything he's done, he was still my father. He was the man who bought me M&Ms because he knew they were my favorite. He was the man who made sure I got the best red velvet cake on my birthday. He was the man who drove me 2 hours just so I could purchase a prom dress that nobody would duplicate. My father wasn't perfect, but I still loved him. After all, he did try to make amends and bind a relationship between my siblings and I. It didn't correct all the bad he's done, but at least it showed he cared. Things couldn't end this way. I knew I had to let my resentment go. Coming to terms with life and the challenges it throws at you takes a long journey. I realize we can't control what happens, but we can control what we make of it. Younger me didn't get the chance to experience a happy family, but at least now I can promise not to make the same mistakes my parents did. As much as I love them both, I refuse to repeat the same cycle. It's not healthy to stay in a toxic relationship, much less when a child is involved. I'm grateful to have had the will to forgive, since not many people can let go of the past. Despite everything I've endured, I regard my childhood as a lesson in disguise.
Thanks, Mary. Incredible. Our last true story comes from Crystal Reyes. Crystal is an English major in the education concentration with a specialty in early childhood and special education. She and her family live in Bayonne.
My first love. I fell in love for the first time at 16. I had just started working at Meat City in Bayonne on City Line. It was my first job on the books. I was a cashier. I met Eric Serrano my second day of working there, and it was his third week working as a butcher. My coworker Ray introduced me to him when I came in for my shift, and he was one of the nicest people I'd ever met. Throughout our shifts, he made corny jokes and I would laugh, not because they were actually funny, but because his laugh was contagious. When he laughed, he would snort, and that would make everyone around him laugh too. When the store was empty and there was nothing to do, he would stand on the side of the meat case and talk to me. We talked about school, our families, and how annoying we found some customers to be. The butchers were given stacks of paper and black crayons to write the prices of the meat on. A week into working, Eric came over with one of the pieces of paper and a crayon and asked me to write my number on it. From that day on, we were inseparable. We spoke all day and all night. We spent every day off of work together, and after a month, he was my boyfriend. I'd had crushes before, and I'd been on one or two dates, but this was completely different. He accepted me with all of my flaws, and I accepted him with all of his. Every Saturday and Sunday morning, he would bring me coffee and breakfast to work. During the week, whether after work or on our off days, we would go for walks in the park, and that was our most treasured time together. I met Eric's mom for the first time while we were coming out of work, and she was just as sweet as he was. He introduced me, and I felt special because she said, "I'm happy I finally got to meet you because he won't shut up about you." He laughed, and so did I. Eric was his mother's only child. He had a younger sister from his dad. I never got to meet Eric's dad because he lived far, but they always kept in close contact. Eric's half sister lived with their dad, and so he never really got to see her much either. Family has always been such an important aspect of my life, so getting to meet the small amount of family he had always meant everything to me. When the holidays came around, I wanted my family to meet Eric. I invited him over for Thanksgiving and I was extremely nervous. My parents didn't really mind our age gap because they knew I was way more mature than other people my age. I had never brought a boy home to meet my parents, and I never invited anyone to spend Thanksgiving with my family. His mom dropped him off at my house, and he had two big bouquets of flowers. He gave one to me and the other one to my mother. I think this was the first time I realized I loved him. He was so outgoing and outspoken that it was easy for him to fit in with my family. Everyone liked him, including my father, who was very difficult to impress. The next day, Eric told me, "That was the best Thanksgiving I've ever had, and I can't wait to spend every year with you." It felt like nothing could tear us apart. I had no idea what to get him for Christmas. I'd never bought a gift for a guy besides my father before, and I spent weeks trying to come up with an amazing gift. With the help of his mother, I bought his favorite cologne, two fitted hats, and a few nice shirts. I couldn't wait to give it to him. He was going away to see his dad for Christmas, so we met up a few days before to exchange gifts. He brought me bombshell perfume from Victoria's Secret, a tote bag, and a pair of beige Ugg boots. I truly loved everything Eric got me, but I was just happy to have someone to love. We were together for a year and a half. One night, we got into a really bad argument about how he had gotten drunk with some of the coworkers at the meat market. I was mad because the previous night he drank so much that I had to call his mother to pick him up from my house. He couldn't even walk. The next day, he didn't remember anything that happened, and that's what led us to arguing. At this time, he had quit working at the meat market to go back to school. I came home from work to find a giant teddy bear, chocolates, and a long letter apologizing. He called my brother to make sure he was home so he could bring all of this while I was at work, and I knew that he really loved me. He found a way to get from Journal Square to my house near 33rd Street in Bayonne just to apologize for an argument that I had already long forgotten. I didn't stay mad at him long because his grand gesture came only after one day after the argument. I've never been a materialistic person, and the things he bought me wasn't what made me forgive him. It was the effort and love he put forward into everything that had to do with our relationship. Nothing is ever perfect, but I loved him. My senior year of high school, I was extremely busy preparing for my annual fashion competition, and it was hard to make time to see Eric. At the beginning of each school year, students in the fashion department would sit down and discuss who was going to participate in FCCLA. It wasn't a requirement, but I'd done it every year since I was a freshman. I would spend almost the entire school year preparing for competition. I'd stay late on Thursdays sewing garments, writing reports, and practicing my 15-minute presentation. Competition lasted 2 days, and it took a lot of hard work to put everything together. I'd won first place in my category for 2 years in a row, so I was determined to win one last time before graduating. Eric knew how important this was to me, and he was always there to support me mentally when I became overwhelmed with the amount of work that went into it. Eric and his mother had moved to Belleville, New Jersey, so it was difficult to find time to travel and see him since I didn't have a car. The last time I saw him was one of those weird warm days in the middle of the winter. He met me at Liberty State Park, where we went for a long walk along the water. His mom came along with her girlfriend, and we all had lunch. When the sun started to go down, he walked me to my car, and what I didn't know was that he'd be kissing me for the last time, because a few weeks later, he would disappear. He stopped picking up my phone calls, responding to my text messages. I found it weird, but I figured when it started going to voicemail every day that he broke his phone. 2 weeks after he disappeared, I started to worry about where he was and if he was okay. By the third week of not receiving any responses from him, I became angry. So many thoughts flooded my mind. Did he block my phone number? Did I do something to push him away? This wasn't someone that I just met yesterday. We had been together a year and a half already. Did he meet someone else and decide to ghost me? A month passed and I was torn apart. I cried and I felt heartbroken, as if our relationship had ended. The issue was there was no closure. How could someone who claimed to love me leave my life without even talking to me about it? 2 months later, I was in Cherry Hill at my annual fashion competition. My friend Simone and I were getting ready to go to the conference that commenced the competition. I got a text message from JR, one of our old co-workers from Meat City. It said, "I'm so sorry for your loss. Eric was a great guy." I was extremely confused and thought that someone was playing a joke on me. I responded, "What are you talking about?" But before he could respond, I got another message from someone else. It was from my friend Jonathan, and it said, "I'm so sorry about Eric, Crystal. I know you really loved him." I couldn't believe what I was reading, and I felt like everything was starting to fall apart. I called his mother, but she didn't pick up. Then my phone went off, and it was another text from JR. He sent me a picture of Eric's obituary, and the tears began to roll down my hot cheek. Eric's sister had posted his obituary on Instagram to tell everyone that he had passed away 2 months prior. They didn't say anything sooner because the family wasn't ready. It felt like someone had ripped my heart out of my chest. I couldn't breathe. I started to hyperventilate as I gasped my chest from the pain. It felt like someone took all of the air out of the room. Everything became blurry. My head was spinning. All of my thoughts were spiraling. Simone came out of the bathroom in our hotel room and she ran over to me. She asked what was wrong, but I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe, and I couldn't even say the unspeakable. I handed Simone my phone and I dropped to the floor, unable to hold my weight as I began to weep harder. Simone sat on the floor next to me and held me while I cried my eyes out. She didn't say anything. She just let me cry on her. After a few minutes, I told Simone that the pain in my chest was getting worse and I couldn't take it anymore. She ran out of the room to find one of our advisors, and she came back with Miss Granado. Miss Granado was like a second mom to me. Simone must have told her what happened before she came in the room, because she looked at me and said, "I'm so sorry, Mama." She sat in front of me on the floor and tried to help me catch my breath. After a few minutes, I could breathe, but the tears wouldn't stop. The tears didn't stop for months. I cried every day for months after I found out Eric had died. I couldn't sleep, and when I did, I would dream of him. I had my first dream about him a month after finding out that he had passed away. We were walking, holding hands, and I was telling him that I didn't want him to leave again. He said that he would always be around, and when he let go of my hand, I woke up. There would be a second of happiness when I awoke from dreams like this, because I saw him. And then the reality of death would smack me out of it. I'd remember that he was no longer alive. I couldn't really hold his hand or kiss him or hug him like in my dreams, and the pain would rush back. I was 17 when Eric died, and when I got the news, I was only 3 weeks away from my 18th birthday. We'd made so many plans for my birthday, and his, since he would have been 21 in July. He was supposed to come to my senior prom with me, and we were supposed to go away for that weekend. I didn't want to do anything anymore. I didn't want to celebrate my birthday or go to prom. My older brother offered to take me, and after declining 3 times, I finally said yes. Nothing felt right though. I didn't enjoy myself because I couldn't get over the fact that he was gone. How did the love of my life die at the age of 20? For months, I tried to get in contact with his mother and his sister, but I never got a response, so I eventually gave up. For so long, I couldn't find closure, and I didn't understand how it happened. I thought he was ignoring me and that he didn't want to be with me anymore. Little did I know that he was no longer here and he ceased to exist. For a long time, I told myself he couldn't be gone. None of his family members physically told me that he was gone, so at times I would try to convince myself that he was still alive. 4 months after finding out that he died, I was sitting in my car, waiting for my mom to come out of her school. I was on my phone, and when I looked up to see if my mom was finally coming out, I saw a man that looked just like Eric. He was standing to the side. He was tall. He had dark brown hair, tan skin, thin lips, and a big nose. His side profile was exactly how Eric looked, and my heart began to race. I started to sweat. I waited for him to fully turn and face me. When he finally turned around, my heart sank. It wasn't him. My chest became heavy. My stomach felt like there was a knot in it. The tears began to rush down my face, and I started to hyperventilate. Once again, it felt like there was no air to breathe. My mom came out of the building and got into the car. When she saw that I was having an anxiety attack, she asked what was wrong. I pointed at the guy who was still standing there, and she said what I was thinking. He looked just like Eric, but he wasn't. I was more desperate for answers at that moment than ever before. I never really had social media, but when I turned 20, I made an Instagram page. One day, unexpectedly, his sister followed me, and I reached out to her. She apologized for not reaching out after he passed away, and she explained that it took a really big toll on Eric's mother. He was her only child, and when he died, it was like her world ended. His sister explained that he went to sleep on Saturday, January 21st, 2017, never woke up. He went into sudden cardiac arrest in his sleep, and his heart never restarted. His mom found him in his bed, and a part of me understood why she didn't reach out right away. If my only son had died, I wouldn't have been focused on telling his girlfriend. She was devastated, and I felt for her. The pain I experienced was almost unbearable, so I couldn't even begin to imagine how she felt. On the other hand, I was mad and frustrated. I wasn't some girl that he had just met. It was unfair, and it caused me to go through more pain than necessary. Being told by friends rather than his family was a slap in the face. Not knowing how he died kept me from getting the closure I needed to move forward. Eric Serrano was my first love and my best friend. I miss him every single day. And for the rest of my life, I will wonder what life would have been like if he were still here. I wonder if we would have been able to get married. I wonder if we would have had kids. I wonder if we would have traveled the world like we said we would. I wonder if we would have grown old together. Eventually, one of us would die of old age, but I would have spent my entire life with the man I loved. I cherished our memories of walking in the park, spending holidays, and goofing off at work. He may not be here anymore, but he will always have a special place in my heart.
Thank you very much, Crystal. That story kind of kills me every time I read it or now hear it. So put your camera on, face your fears, which is everybody else here. So now we have a little chance to do questions, and I kind of already knew we were going to do that. So I have a question that I would like to ask Crystal and Marie and Justin. Crystal, can you make yourself visible?
Yes, give me 1 second. I'm pulling over.
Thank you. Oh, never mind. Don't make yourself visible. But the question though is for all two of you or three, and of course, as your teacher, so I know the writing can be very difficult. Of course, there's technique, which is really important. It has to be really exacting, which you guys have taken a lot of effort to do. But more so, I'm interested. There are some stories that we kind of lock up, and there are some stories that we feel that we couldn't tell to everyone, if we had 100 tongues. Difficult and revealing stories, and I think of these three stories as being in that category. So I was kind of curious how difficult it was for you guys to do this particular writing. And just jump in, Justin or Marie and Crystal, when you're
Yeah, sure.
parked.
I'll start. So for me personally, this was pretty difficult to write about. Initially, the concept for my essay had nothing to do with my father. I just wanted to write about this big house that my family moved into and how it was big and beautiful and everything you'd want. But it ultimately pushed my sisters and I away from each other. We all had our own rooms as opposed to all being in the same room. We started spending a lot less time together. And, now that we're all older, lives have grown apart so much. And something that I especially noticed during the pandemic, seeing as we're all home, we all stayed in our rooms isolated. But as I continued to write and write and write and go draft and draft and draft, I decided to pivot to focus on my father, because my father is very proud of this house. It's something that he spent his whole life trying to achieve. And I thought it was just very interesting dynamic between me and my father, because there are things that I wish we could go back and do over and change. And I wrote inside my essay that I used to hate him. And that was probably the most difficult thing to write, because as I've grown and I've matured, I kind of understand his perspective now. I understand why he did the things that he did, and why he was tired and didn't have time to do things with me and my sisters when we were younger. So it was very difficult for me to write, but I'll let anyone else have the floor.
I think it was difficult to write because I feel like in life, people are always like telling you that you have to move forward and you have to kind of put things on the back burner, especially when you're busy and there's a lot going on. And I think it was the first time that I'd ever written out my feelings and the first time I'd ever written about what happened. And I think it's scary because, other people are going to read it and, well, I guess hear it. But I think it's as writers, as English majors, as people who love reading and writing, it was therapeutic. And I think it kind of helped in a way. It kind of brought closure. So I don't know if my other peers feel like that, but I think it was definitely something that I needed to do that I didn't think I needed to do. So I'm grateful to our former professor, for encouraging us to be creative and encouraging us to be vulnerable.
I agree with you, Crystal. For me, actually, it wasn't hard to write since I use writing as an outlet, and I've already written about this part of my life. So it was more difficult to share such a vulnerable piece, especially since I always try to repress those memories. But it's been a very long time since then, and I've moved on. So I think sharing it with the class and, with the rest of you guys, it was like the final step in closing this chapter of my life, especially with the feedback I received from other classmates and how they could relate. It just really helped me. If it made me feel like I wasn't alone, and as a writer, you want people to understand you, and I'm happy I accomplished that. So it really did help writing it and sharing it with others.
Thank you guys.
Thank
Thank you
you.
all. And if anyone else has a question, just unmute yourself and ask.
First of all, I want to thank the three of you for your courage. I am moved by your words and for your, I'm speechless by the amazing writing you've accomplished. I hope you write more, and I hope I get to read it. So we have about 5 more minutes of questions, and please let's open up to anybody that wants to ask these talented writers any questions they want to know about them.
I have one. I'm aspiring to be a writer as well, but I'm also an artist.
Yeah.
What was the biggest hurdles that you guys had to face while writing your stories? Like for each of you, because I know it's not easy talking about something so personal, especially something that can emotionally affect you. So, what was a hurdle that you were facing while you were writing your story?
I think getting over the judgment you may receive from anyone that's reading it or hearing it. For me personally, as a second generation immigrant, and I'm fortunate enough to live inside this big house and be given a lot of toys, video games, and everything growing up, I was very afraid while I was writing to sound like a spoiled brat. But I kept writing, and I kept digging through my mind and my ideas that I had for this essay to try to break through to that. It wasn't about everything that was given. It was about the relationship between my father and I, and how by seeing what he's done with his life, I've grown to kind of modify it
and revise it and decide what I want out of life. So it's really about just finding what matters to you and not being afraid to share it and let it out.
I think the hardest part for me was editing, because we did like one draft and then we revised at the end of the semester. And when you do a first draft and other people read it and the whole class read it, everyone kind of like is like, well, what about this and what about that? And they ask for more detail, and more detail is important. But I think the hard part is putting such personal stuff into something that a lot of people are gonna read, and that a lot of people are gonna hear this story. But I think my final draft was way better than my first draft. So even though it was the hardest part, I think that in the end it was the best version it could have been.
Most
Yeah.
improved essay ever.
Yeah, you guys did an excellent job. For me, I guess the hardest part was making it organized and constructing it precise, because there's so many details that we forget to involve in the essay. And like, you have all these thoughts and all these memories, and it's so chaotic and it's just it just to make it organized in a way that like it flows together was the hardest part for me.
We have a few more minutes for some additional questions. Anyone? Because if not, I have one. Yeah, I was wondering, of course, writing for you was a sort of catharsis, right? It helps you express your feelings. But how do you ever think about the reader? How is the reader going to feel when they read your work? Do you want them to empathize? Do you want them to feel, related? Because what you all wrote is a very relatable material to a lot of students or a lot of people your age or any age. I could even feel related to some of your stories. So do you ever think or consider the reader when you are writing? Any of you can answer that.
Do you want to go for it? You go ahead, Crystal. You go.
Because I felt very moved. So
I think like when you're writing just for yourself, you don't really think of a reader. But I think that when you are writing with the intention of other people reading, you try to put things in there that people will be able to relate to, and things that other people will understand. And I think us all coming from the same area, using names of places that like City Line and Kennedy and things like that are important. And I think also listening to your readers saying things about your writing, like I think you should do this, or I think you should improve on this, is important too, because their opinion is what makes your writing better at times.
Thank you, Crystal.
Yeah,
Justin?
no, I absolutely agree. I think that's one of the most important aspects of drafting. Because when I write an essay or any work, I just sit down, write ideas, get something on the page. And then afterwards, that's when I start to think about, okay, how will the reader perceive this? How will this sound if I speak it out? I think this particular essay, because it was written for our creative writing class, we had to read it aloud, at least the first draft, to our classmates. So we definitely had to have the reader in mind, at least for that second draft.
Thank you.
So, yes.
Well, I would love to keep reading all your work. Marie, do you have a minute if you want to say something about your reader?
I was just going to say that I have to read it from two perspectives. First, from my perspective, and then I have to think in the eyes of the reader's perspective and how they would read this. And I have to consider, what they're taking in and how I should be able to connect with how they would be able to connect with me. So yeah.
Thank you. Well, we have to leave it here, but thank you so much, Crystal. Nice to see you. I remember you as a student, and thank you so much. And
Thank
please don't
you.
leave, because we are going to keep going to our next presenter. A lot of you might have already seen her artwork yesterday. She's now she was an artist yesterday, and today she's well, yes, a writer, a poetry writer, and she's reading her poem entitled "Once Upon a Dream Journey." This is Alba Toledo, if you know, very famous right now. Her works are amazing. I had her behind me, but the lighting is really bad, so I had to move my computer from your beautiful work, Alba. Um, uh, about Alba, just a few words. Besides being a mother, a very good mother, and I met her kids, Alba is a transfer art student from Hudson Community College, and she has already completed her bachelor's degree in fine arts and crafts, with a minor in Latin American, Caribbean, and Latino studies. Alba has been an amazingly strong voice for the Latin community in our campus, participating in all our LATI colloquiums. And as you hopefully saw yesterday, she also curated with Cesar Omar Sanchez, the NJCU student virtual art exhibit named Nuestra Lucha, Pandemic and Social Decay, which is taped and is in our website. So I hope you go back and watch the presentation if you were not present yesterday. So I just want to say one more thing about Alba, because I asked her what inspired her to write a poem, since I know her artwork. And Alba's poem, she said that she wrote it through a very lonely and challenging time of her life, facing depression. And one night she had a beautiful dream that was given as a gift and inspired her to write it. And according to Alba, a dream that turns into a young girl's journey from despair to wonder, and finally leads her into promise of tomorrow. Beautiful words, Alba, and welcome you.
Hi everybody. Yes, Ms. Lagos pretty much explained my poem. It took a while to write it, but I'm proud to kind of present it today for you guys. Um, I guess I'll start right now. Once upon a journey, in my dreams, a young girl was traveling down, trying to escape the darkness that had suddenly come over town. Looking down a long empty road, she was feeling hurt, worthless, broken, and lost. While riding in the car, she kept looking around. Instantly, she felt anxious and slowly paused, for she sensed that someone or something was following, but questioned how. Nobody is there. She bravely looked behind, left, right, and ahead. All she saw was damaged trees far and near. Heart racing rapidly and breathing deeply, she began thinking, am I going insane? Touching her chest and shaking her head, very confused as she wondered, is this a game? Although the area was foggy, cold, and damp, there was an intense urge of needing to be freed. Telling herself, why am I running? For, for this is not who I am. As time stopped for a minute, a voice whispered, come to me. Paralyzed with shock from the soft voice she heard, vibrating with nerves and trembling in fear, she could not believe what had happened. Then she says, not possible. No one is near, no one is here. Yet it spoke again. Please come here to me. As it gently spoke, it warmed her heart, then caressed her soul. She started to feel a comforting but protective force that took away all fears of being prosecuted. scolded, or controlled. However, her suspicion of the voice was growing, so she gathered the courage to say, "Who are you?" For she desperately wanted to find the person speaking. "Show me the way to find you and guide me through." Waiting in anticipation for any sign to occur, a small magical light of sparkles suddenly appeared. Time had stood still as she enjoyed watching it gleam, lights that seemed like summer night fireflies gently glowing in the air. She hears, "Follow the lights and come to me." From her view, the entire forest was shimmering mystically. Just then, a forceful energy pulls her down a path, where at the end, she can see a white figure shining brightly. The young girl courageously takes a step at a time, as the voice says, "Do not fear. I have a message of promise." Astonished with both what she sees and hears, she walks faster to the lit up passage, but with calmness. The closer and closer she gets to the white glowing figure, the lights change into glittering colors flickering in the sky. Lively colors of green, purple, blue, pink, and gold. Her excitement and inner emotions were building high, for she could not predict what would happen next. For more desire than ever of wanting to cope. With no hesitation, she walked faster and faster, running unthinkably to know her answers of hope. As she runs, colored lights are racing by like shooting stars. She notices in her front view is getting more clear. In an instant, she stomps her foot to the ground and stops. As she sees, the figure was indeed a heavenly woman. As the woman walks to her gracefully, the young girl drops. "Do not fear, you are safe with me upon a graceful land." Drops to her knees in awe of the figure's loveliness, sweat dripping, catching air, staring in an astonishment. For in darkness she has never seen such a magnificent presence. The woman walks to the girl and tenderly touches her face. "Great, I am glad you are here. Get up, there is much to discuss." She gets up but will not move a step until she knows. "I know you are wondering who I am, but follow and just give trust." The girl was no stranger to harm, so she did not move a muscle. The woman says, "Do not be naive. Follow me. This is a message you've been longing to discover." Hand in hand, they walk together to a wall of bushes and flowers, where the woman opens a scene to a whole world ready to be uncovered. Sorry. The luminous woman walks through, fades away, then vanishes, leaving it open for the girl to come in. Huffs and says, "Not going back from here." Uneasily, the girl closes her eyes, takes a step, and goes through. Upon entering, she opens her eyes and sheds a cheerful tear. "Wow, what is this place? Please tell me where I am." The woman says, "This is Earth's spiritual paradise. Why have you brought me here? And who are you?" The woman sits and says, "I am the mother to all living things. I am the one who delivers message of hope, love, and joy. The girl looks around and sees blue waters from the river to the waterfall, luscious flowers with addictive smells for her to enjoy, sun glistening goldenly against voluminous trees standing tall. Come sit with me so I can tell you the story of tomorrow. An enchanting breeze whisks the girl closer to Mother. Mother grabs her hand and pulls her in safely. My dear, you have traveled far to get away from others. The girl sits on a wooden bench covered in flowery vines. I have a message of the future from the spirits of prosperity. The girl focuses on Mother, but is looking at her with wonder. Child, the spirit sent you here to be freed of all negativity. The girl cries as she senses a feeling of relief in her heart. They know of all your fear, frustration, pain, and suffering. They know how much you've been hurting and have fallen apart. Wiping the tears away, Mother lifts the girl's face. Tomorrow's another day, and there is much work to be done. You are someone of promise and must break barriers of comfort. It is time you show others you are the one who has won. Show the world your truth, your story, and the person you are. I see a warrior with passion, strength, power, intellect, and much more. You have it all. You are ready. People need to hear your words. You've been hiding too long, for your future is resilient and pure. They believe you can make a great difference in the world. People are facing devastating challenges and situations in life, living in an abandoned society of complete emptiness. Once they hear a voice of motivation, assurance, and strive, tomorrow will be a new outlook to look forward to. For you have a new mission to accomplish and achieve. You must become a leader to the damaged, lost, and broken down. The girl asks, why me? For she is still facing disbelief. Mother's answer was clear. It must be you, for you know what they feel. You have been in their place where people have shut you out. Use that energy as your fuel and speak loud and clear. Show the people your real colors and show them what you're about. When you go back, just remember, you have a new purpose. You will need to work harder than you ever did before. It's your moment. Wake up. To be someone. Wake up. Wake up. Rise. Wake up. Move. Wake up and soar, soar, soar. Thank you.
Um, Thank you so much, Alba. I am amazed by your talent. 2 days ago, we were putting together your sculptures and your paintings, and today I'm listening to this moving and inspiring poem. And and I hope I would like to ask you something, but let's see if anyone else has a question first. Thank you, Alba. Can I ask?
Go ahead.
Okay. are you, since you're so talented in writing and in art, in sculpture, are you planning some kind of multimedia project in the future? Because if you combine art and text, I would love to see what comes out of your work.
Yeah, as a child, because I grew up like a lot of the stories we heard earlier in a difficult childhood, where I seen a lot of things. So I was exposed to a lot of therapy and different forms of therapy, and I was not very talkative as a child. I was mute. I was a mute child for 4 years out of my life. I did not want to speak to anybody. So my way of communication was writing and drawing. And that's what inspired me to do multimedia, because I don't gravitate towards just one form of art to express myself. I use multiple art.
Thank you. Virginia?
Want to say that congratulations, Alba. I have you as a student for several classes while you were in the minor, and you continue to surprise me. So I just wish that you continue the work in your painting and in your writing. Please do so. We love you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, well, we have to keep moving. Amazingly, it's a very quick and fast day, and very tiring, and I am out of words by the talent of our students, and it keeps going. Today, now our next panel's title is on Pan-Latinx poetry. I know, oh, hi, Vincent. I know Ethan has a lot to say about Latinx. I'm not going to get into it right now. And this session will be featured and coordinated by renowned poet Vincent Toro. Mr. Toro is a Puerto Rican poet, playwright, director, and educator. He's the author of 2 poetry collections, which I would like to read very soon, called Stereo Island Mosaic, and his new book, Tertulia. With the launch of this new book, Mr. Toro has been creating a series of community-focused virtual tertulias, I guess, because of the pandemic, hopefully it will change, in the spirit of the Latin American social gatherings from which his book takes its title. Today, this panel will share poetic legacies and intertwined histories of the people of the Caribbean diaspora. And I'm looking forward to this. The event will open with a reading conducted in the mode of a hip hop cipher, with poets performing one poem at a time in cycles, followed by a discussion that will eventually open up to include all attendees. I'm not hip hopping, but I hope someone else will hop in to the presentation. And welcome, Vincent, and I'll let you introduce yourself and the other.
Thank you, Cora. Thank you so much, everyone. We're so happy to be here with you all to share some poetry. So what we're going to do is, as was already alluded, we're going to do a poetry reading, but that's done like a round robin or a hip hop cipher. So we're going to do things in a circle. We have 4 poets from you today from across the Latinx and Latin American diaspora. And the way it's going to work is we're going to have someone given a kickoff poem, and then 3 other poets will then be, 3 of us will be reading in a cycle. So you've already heard my bio. I just want to run through the bios of the other poets, and then we'll get started, and also mention a change as I mentioned the bios. So here's the other poet you're going to hear from today. You're going to hear from initially from the poet Maria Fernanda, and she actually is currently a 2020-2021 Poetry Coalition Fellow from the Academy of American Poets. It's a really big deal. Her poems and translations have appeared in places like the Breakbeat Poets, Volume 4, Latinx, the Wide Shore, and the Acentos Review. You're also going to be hearing from the poet Ruben Quesada, who he's an author of 2 chapbooks of poetry and translations, Revelations and Exiled from the Throne of Night, selected translations of Luis Cernuda, and a collection of poetry called Next Extinct Mammal. His writings appeared in Best American Poetry, the Harvard Review, the American Poetry Review, and Tri-Quarterly, and other anthologies and journals. And he serves on the board of the National Book Critics Circle. It's a big deal. He's also the founder of the Latinx Writers Caucus, an organization concerned with education, equity, and inclusion of Latinx writers in the literary and publishing community. And he's the co-editor of an anthology of essays on Latinx poetry and poetics with Natalie Center-Sapico, slated for publication by University of New Mexico Press. We also have a change in our last poet. We were supposed to have the Chicana poet Emi Perez with us, but she had a family emergency. So we are fortunate enough to have instead Dr. Gisela Acosta, who has a book coming out actually this month. And Dr. Acosta is an associate professor at the City University of New York, Bronx Community College. She's a daughter of Cuban and Colombian immigrants. And her first book of poetry, Things to Pack on the Way to Everywhere, which is coming out this month, is an Andres Montoya Poetry Prize finalist and is forthcoming from Get Fresh Books this month. She's also had work in Best American Poetry, The Baffler, The Acentos Review, Quayle Journal, Red Fez, The Gathering of the Tribes, Split This Rock, In Full Color, Patterson Literary Review, Mi Poesías, and short plays on reproductive freedom, and celebrating 20 years of Black girlhood, the Lauryn Hill Reader. She is also a Geraldine R. Dodge Foundation poet, a Macondo Fellow, and editor of Latina Outsiders, Remaking Identity. Her work focuses on Afro-Latinx and indigenous ancestry, queer identity, and the punk and house music subculture she grew up with in Chicago. So with that, those are our poets you're going to hear from today, but I'd like to take a second first because we've had a couple of situations where even in this panel, we've had people who either were stricken ill or who had to respond to family that were stricken ill. And we are still in a pandemic, and these issues are coming up for all of us, as we know we're all dealing with this. So I just wanted to take a moment for us to take a moment of pause, just to think about and consider all those people that we know and even those that we don't know who have been impacted by a global pandemic that has gone on for more than a year now. Thanks, everyone. And so with that, Maria Fernanda, you want to kick us off?
Yes. Hey, guys. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you so much. Let's just tear it up. So I'm going to read a quick poem. I am based in Arizona, and that's what this is based on. And I'm just, again, honored to be here. The poem is Chiquitito. The day before shelter in place. Before the Gilbert Salon closes, the Caucasuals brag between hair flips and vocal fry. They laugh about clearing the shelves of boxed bullets. Like cheap candles, they stack, snug under their husbands, their brothers, their cousins' arms. Each box hot red and stooped over. This is the sound click, click their God makes. Click, click, your Target runs out of water. Click, click, this Walmart soft counts paper. The corner store's line is out the door, hair flip, click, click. Everyone stands 6 feet apart like a crowded upright burial ground. Click, click, it's night out in this sundown town. Click, click, where white boys still shoot balled up lightning. They're outside my apartment. Again, they are bored, the women say. It's a joke, they say. It's more like a prayer with no one's name. So thank you so much. I am so grateful to be here. And let's get these books, guys. Let's get these books. Like You're on mute. You're on mute.
It happens
all the time.
So it happens all the time.
You. I was just thanking Maria Fernanda for being like our invocation poet and kicking things off. Yeah. She has to run, but I hope she has an opportunity to jump back in when we're talking later on. Yes. So we're gonna start our Style for Style now. So it's gonna, we're basically gonna circle around. We're gonna kick it off. Grisel's gonna start first, followed by Ruben, then myself, and we'll do that 3 times. So Grisel, are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. I'm ready. I just want to thank David and Cora and Vincent, and I'm so happy to be here with all of you. And it was wonderful to hear some of the work before this panel. So I'm very, very happy to be here. So the first poem that I'm going to read is about my dad. And it's called Beneath the Ivy. My father was this incredible leader in Chicago, minister, therapist, very, very educated, multiple degrees. And this is about him. Beneath the Ivy. I didn't know my father graduated from Princeton until I was 28, after I earned my master's in education. He said he didn't want to brag. When I told one white colleague in my state school doctoral program my dad went to Princeton, her jaw fell. She said, "Really?" I've stopped voicing the fact, tired of disbelief, or maybe the deeper question, what happened to you? Papi, like so many others, loved me, but assumed I wasn't smart when I chose black lipstick, chains, and an anarchist outlook. I used to wish I could say I chose not to go to an Ivy. But the truth is, no one believed I could. So I didn't either. Somehow I grew on rain and secondhand scholars. A decade before dying, Alzheimer's already destroying his limbs and brain, Papi apologized to me in front of his entire congregation, said his assumptions were ignorant, but a bevy of colleagues from similar Ivy Leagues now take up the crusade, questioning why I choose to teach in the Bronx, unaware of its role in cultural revolution. Today, upon entering my home office, my father's Latin diploma greets you. I keep it, not out of sentiment or pride or nostalgia. It is a reminder of what I have accomplished.
That was wonderful, Grisel. Oh my goodness. Wow. Let's see if I can follow that. Hi, everybody. I'm coming from Chicago. I'm in Chicago at the moment. And I'd like to read from my first collection, Next Extinct Mammal. It's a poem, an imagining of my parents. This is called Last Photograph of My Parents, San Jose, Costa Rica. Tortillas clap against flowered palms, steaming bowls of avena, frijoles black as the rumbling sky. Arroz con pollo simmers. Against the kitchen window, small clouds rise. Papa dances to the electric beat of the marimba, his cheek bristly against Mama's neck. His thick fingers sift through her wispy hair. I am nowhere to be found, neither in the foreground nor background. And today I sit in this chair in the corner of my house, covered with a poncho of blue flowers, looking out at asphalt roads overflowing with rain. Along the road, steam rises like blotchy fingerprints.
Yeah, love it. Nice. Oh, All right, this cipher's heating up, everyone. Thank you, Ruben. Yeah, so I'm actually going to start, even though this whole like Tertulia tour that I've been doing is from my new book, I want to open today with something from my first book, because I think it's fitting for the colloquium where we're really, you know, this is for the Latin American Studies and Latinx Studies group, right? So this is about the island where my family's from. It's called the Roads of Borinquen. The roads of Borinquen snake like igneris plodding down the Toro Verde mountains. They shake and they shimmy like Giovanni Hidalgo's palms, like palm trees cambered from sand to sky. They juke jive like wild bougainvilleas splintering into rainforest of cell towers. They reach up into salt flats and twirl into Sunday worship at the sprawling lechoneras of Guavate. The roads of Borinquen slope and careen like guayaba trees caught in the crosswind, like the dirt terraces of Yauco sprouting coffee beans, or the dust of our misguided slang that Esmeralda sweeps from the patio. They taper and they bloat like arteries pumping sun into the canciones that feed us, swaying like hammocks slung across mango trees where first kisses seed into copper saints. The roads of Borinquen shapeshift like domino tables once midday strikes. They contort like town criers, slide like razor blades over 4-day-old beards, or the machete blade through the caña that mysteriously makes its way onto our mesas. The roads of Borinquen veer from the promise of the cacique to the promise of 2-for-1 quarter pounders and back again like a waterfall of semis cascading into a landscape of rental cars parked on bates. They curve and jump like cockfights through colonial plazas littered with juggling pajaritos, rollerblades, and angelic vagrants, as if trying to shake free from the surf shops and department stores like a pair of dusty chancletas. The roads of Borinquen wind dive upward into the arms of the Virgin on every wall in every casita on the hillside. They blindside like sparring partners in the gym behind the old sugar mill. The roads of Borinquen burrow through cities named after slain warriors, Jayuya, Gaye, Utuado, as if to pour salt on wounds beyond healing. They lull like Liliana, who still laments surrendering the mountains for the city. They sing and surprise like the neighbors springing up on doorsteps at 3 a.m, armed with guidos and warm rum, screaming "Bomba!" before carrying us gently back to bed, cradling us as we dream. The roads of Borinquen stretch like sunbathing cobwebs. They pull pranks in the form of covert potholes and cow crossings, then invite us to Joyuda for steamed langosta. The roads of Borinquen steer into the gullies where the ancestors have buried the village's secrets. They swoop up into the moon that each night promises us a chance to become the myths our masters spilled into the sea.
I was so busy clapping, I didn't realize it was my turn again. Okay. Oh my gosh. That was boom for real. That's what you like to say, right? Okay, let me see what I'm going to read. I'm trying to keep the energy up. I chose such sad poems. But I'm gonna keep it that way. It's what I chose, so we'll go back and forth and maybe it'll add dimension to the conversation later. So this next poem is called The Grandparents I Will Never Meet. And I think that some of you may know this predicament. Many of us who are born here in the United States, for whatever reasons, we may not get to meet some of our family members, que están allá. So this is about that. This is The Grandparents I Will Never Meet. Papi's father died of tuberculosis when he was 7. He was a carpenter. I touched the small car and horse he carved for my father before he left the planet. The toys were smooth, as if Papi polished them with use. Mami says that Abuelo was known for his charm. It must be true. Papi being the leader so charismatic, everyone in Logan Square flocked his path as he walked the neighborhood, smiling. Mommy's mother died of varying ailments, mainly her heart. Sadness ran in my family. An aunt was said to have hung herself. My grandmother carried the same grief, never smiling in photos. Mommy is the same way. If a picture is taken, we have to tickle her for her to show her teeth. I have two images of my grandfather in Cuba. One is based on a photo that was kept in a magazine, carelessly thrown away. He is holding up a catch of several enormous fish, huge toothy grin. The second image is abuelo as a viejito, decaído, so wrinkled and skinny, toothless smile. These two men refuse to converge in my mind, as if they were from different universes. I wonder what I might have learned from their presence in my life. Instead of este mierda long distance or never had access at all existence with them, might I have become skilled at raising sales or understood my mom's, my brother's, my own bouts of mental illness? Or maybe might have Papi understood my artistic nature if abuelo / sculptor hadn't died, if I'd met any of them. I thought of this a long time when a mentor shared her birthday with me in Chicago, surrounded by her family, sisters, nieces, cousins, all elaborating on things they'd cooked, sewn, built together.
Nice, nice. I too have very dark poems, and I'm going to stick with it. But I'm going to try one that's a little more playful here. This is called. This is from a series of kind of fantastic poems that I rarely read. This is called Belladonna. A wicked witch, rich with misfortune, makes much with time on her bitter glittered hands, dressed in rings of gold. A day in late August, bent toward berries, she takes the sweet scent of a shrub dressed in red. Then from behind a darkling vine, an eagle's talon dives down. Her head goes awry and she goes afloat when grasped by the throat, leaving only a slipper behind. The unfortunate shrew had lost a shoe, mistaken for a waterfowl. In a nest she sat when she spotted a rat, whining for help below. He'd been pecked, though not eaten, and his body was a bloodied cowl. She hid within an abandoned shell, devising a way to escape this hell. But to be free, she'd need to climb down on hands and knees, past crows, past cat, past the dying fat rat, and avoid becoming the perfect meal for the gray fox to steal, and who hid a few branches below. Hidden in the canopy of an angel oak, a murder of crows, watch a cat dressed in a green velvet cloak, who utters an occasional meow. There above the bough, between each meow, the persistent whine of an ill-fated shrew. The cat, asleep, doesn't notice the creep of a gray fox toward the blackening sky. Atop the trunk of this great tree, the gray fox seeks a tasty treat of eagle eggs and lady meat. On a day unlike today, the sky dark and gray, the oak stands, branches like hands, holding the clouds above. There are some folk who have said the oak is filled with specters of former men. Yet no one is sure, no one has seen the seraphim. It has always been simply conjecture. To be set free from this tree, one would need the Godspeed of an angel. From the ground, not a sound can be heard, not from a woman up high, not from a bird. And in this grim tree is a wicked banshee or a welcomed pet to a single eaglet waiting for her to play. We've all desired to do great things, not often with wings, and now in the airy appeared a fairy surrounded in a golden mist. The sun had set when a chatting eaglet aroused the sleeping shrew. Upon seeing the fairy, the woman grew merry, seeing a chance to further her stance, and she began to plead for help to impede from being eaten upon the eagle's return. Close your eyes, said the fae, then swept her away in a light like a meteorite, a great ball of fire setting her landing on a briar with a crash and a splash of pink petals and flesh.
Yeah, I love it. I gotta say, I love the rhyming patterns in that one. I know rhyme has gone out of fashion in poetry, but y'all know I'm a rhyme loyalist. It's the hip hop head in me. So I really love the way you're using sound in that piece, Ruben. I'm also going to be dark because I had planned on reading this piece since the panel was organized, because I know that this is again for the Latin American Studies Department, and this poem is about really like the history of Latin America's relationship with the U.S., which is bound to be a dark poem. So this is called Revuelta. And I have this one memorized, but it's been a while. So if you see me peeking over, it's because I forgot a line or two. The agaves, the passion fruit that enveloped me, the silver earmarked for markets beyond these tropics. They compel you to post outfits at the foot of my bed. Each morning you blitzkrieg the taverns and pineapple canucos, turn the rivers into arsenic, lock my kin up in sheet metal factories, committing autopsies on their bodies while they are still alive. You ask me to leave. You ask me to return, mounting electrified fences around my springs and mineral deposits. You bottle up the reservoir of my birth and ask me to pay, but I have no currency. You cut the Amaira, the Quechua, the Locono from my uvula, pry me from the vines that nursed me, relocate me to a fiberglass asylum, tell me to leave my farm fallow, indict me when I protest, when I beg to be buried next to my mother. You ask me to leave. You ask me to return. You irrigate my daughter's veins, widow me with your excavations, post eviction notices on my hearth, and render me a vagrant in my own roost. When I scale the Andes to nest in the backyard of your vacation home, you drop the red flag and cry encroachment. With a single papaya, I then camp beneath the bridge, lay a blanket across your metropolis of dismembered mainframes. You send subpoenas. You call me trespasser. You ask me to leave. You ask me to return. You demand that I make myself useful if I am to stay. I repair your appliances, put up drywall, pick your apples, polish your porcelain, raise your children who never see you because you are in my country putting up luxury townhouses and carving my cousins up into chattel. But from your detritus, I harvest a new family, subsisting on only prayer and memory. I feed my kids the tomes you abandon in landfills until they siphon the venom from your syntax, miracle your numerals, and earn a seat in the academy next to your offspring. Now you demand a refund on what you stole. You stifle me after I unearth your cooked books, smear me for dismantling the guillotine circus you pitch on my stoop, then dispatch an assistant to offer a settlement of rotten tripe. When I show you a deed to the land, you mispronounce my name. You create a shortage of spikenard. You invent the idea of North. You hawk designer brand coups, make lullabies of my wounds, and then you ask me to leave. You ask me to return. You ask me to leave. You ask me to return. You ask me to leave to return. You ask me to leave to return to leave. You ask me to return. You ask me to turn. You ask me to turn. You ask me to deceive. You ask me to believe. You ask me to receive. You ask me to receive, to believe, to deceive. You ask me to turn. You ask me to, you ask me to, you ask me to, you ask me to.
Yeah.
And we just say, yeah, for everybody. Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, phenomenal. Yes. One of my favorite poems ever.
What a pleasure. Oh my God.
So I think we have one more circle left, correct? Okay. So I'm just going to continue.
Yeah, we have about 15 more minutes, and I would love to stay here all night long listening to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to read a poem that is thematically connected to the one that Vincent just read. However, it seems like Vincent was mainly talking about the US relationship to the rest of Latin America. I will be mainly looking at the relationship between Spain and the rest of the Americas. So this is called Mother, Father, Child of the Americas. And this is supposing a different relationship with Spain as opposed to fatherland or motherland. Mother, Father, Child of the Americas. It is raining in Cancerat. Orange fruit in the trees outside my window drips sugar into the cracks of blue tiles below, a mosaic with words like Yoko Ono and Electric Boogie. So when my friend Nova says, have fun in the fatherland, equating Spain with dad-like things, order, tweed jackets, or shaving tools lined on a towel, this father seems incongruent with the motherly oil-scented water on my window. We've just come back from Montserrat, La Fenomenal mountain range with impossible trails and religious artifacts. We artists talk of the Spanish conquest, painfully attempt to reconcile the blood-moistened soils of the Americas, the mixture that made the bricks of the monastery the monks hoped would raise them up to God. How could our mother, España, treat us so cruelly? Selfish luxury abounds on the streets of Barcelona. Gold, rococo, surrealist curves in glass, decadence we too now enjoy at the price of ancestral slaves. Or maybe no. Perhaps this country of cured meats and wines isn't our mother, but is our child. The true child of the Americas, a baby, wrapped in blue seas and marble cathedrals. We fed it guavas and corn, nursed it into cheerful peace to the rhythms of the Amazon, let it suckle on the breast of rainstorms and coconut milk. We love our child, combed its hair with translucent shells and dusted its face with sand powder. We spun its clothes with the sparkling salt of our oceans, and our jaguar taught it pride and fierceness. Oh yes, she is our child, and we raised her well, neglecting our own needs, letting our lands wither, get dusty with wrinkles and exhaustion. I know this is true because I have seen how my own mother has given herself to the point of neglect, letting her daughter shine in fancy dresses and degrees. Who gets the credit for familial sacrifice? The fanciful child so pretty in satin, or la madre que sacrifica su último kilo para que su hija tenga lo mejor del mundo? We want both the sacrificial mother and the spoiled child, don't we? Both, the plain nun who forgives all our sins, the princess garbed in borrowed jewels and a sly wink. Oh, to have for one day the Americas in cloaks of royalty, but she'd never. She is La Monja, who gives and gives and gives so that we all will fall in love with her hija, the bitch who never feels guilty about wearing the diamonds of conflict.
Incredible. If you'll indulge me, I'd like to. I'm gonna try something with a video. It's about 4.5 minutes. Okay, here we go. In this blood that haunts my skin, in the folds of my brain are burrowed the harrowed words to describe you. Bleak, damned, and when the universe was young, it possessed the means to give you breath, to deliver you to me, here, a half-life propped against the wall in the corner of your room where so many worlds undressed, discovering your straw-colored hair patting your chest, knuckles, and toes. This was our last day together. I stumbled onto the drawn curtains as we watched ghostly orbs carry in the laughter of the neighbor's dog. Outside, children passed as an ice cream truck's siren song shook you back to life from the ghost of heroin. Photographs on the wall ambered beneath the sap-like weight of phosphorus. And what more could the periodic table offer? Already, you were nitrogen, sulfur, even gold. I want to outlive my mother so she never learns of the needles hidden throughout my apartment, the way she once hid money from herself for times when she didn't work enough. And I pray that when my body has been wrecked, that she'll understand it had nothing to do with her. Listen, friends, I don't fully understand why it happened, and it would be very easy to stay like this forever. Each night, I cradle myself to control the spasms of my legs, and with every heartbeat, my breath begins to drift. I have only ever left this planet once, in a billow of thistles, after snorting methamphetamine in an abandoned record store, the birds settling into the windowsills. A man whom I was engaged to left me to take communion with a Jesuit order in Ireland. From Christ's dress, a thread spun itself into the body of Adam. From out of his palm, the translucent figure of Eve appeared. I never heard from him again. The salmon-colored sky eagerly held the night back, long enough for them to recognize their flaws. I would have waited alone 1,000 years for the coming of angels, blinding bright as the spring sun to arrive, to abandon this world for another. Stunned by their flashing lights aflame across the bow of their spacecraft, landing lights for that world. Herds of animals, horses, humans, and fish fixed. The angels approached. Come angels, come beasts. Men and women cried out to each other. The angels cried. Some were lost between their earthly life and paradise. And what is paradise anyway? Few imagined being bound to this world. Blue halo of emerald mountains. Extraordinary, ordinary. They rose, a crucifixion, yardarm, flying away.
Nice. Down with the multimedia poetry. Very avant-garde in the Latinx and Latin American sense. Love it. Well, I just got a short one to close out that I think hopefully will kind of wrap up and tie up everything that's kind of already happened. I'll give you all some context, those of you who don't know. So a couple years back, which seems like 400 years after the last presidency, Fox News had reported that that previous president, whose name I don't mention, that he was threatening to cut off aid to 3 Mexican countries, and that's what it said on Fox News. 3 Mexican countries. So I think we all know what that implies, especially in this group. So I'll just read the poem, but it's called All the Mexicos. I want to live in all the Mexicos. The Mexico of Bolaño's nostalgic fantasias. The Mexico where Eliezer Gaitan served up his allocutions. Somewhere that I won't be interrogated for taking a sick day. Where my neighbor stops by to bring me caldo. I'll live in any Mexico, to be honest. The Mexico Lionel, Rugama, and Gioconda Belli called home. Or even one of the Mexicos where everyone speaks French Creole. Any Mexico will do, so long as I don't lose any more digits to these Arctic gales. My lover once told me of a Mexico where there are no advertisements and you'd swear the cafe was brewed from gold. Sign me up for that Mexico. How about the Mexico where Saint Romero delivered his last sermon? Give me the ceiba trees or the dunes of the Pampas, the cane fields of the Mexico that bred my parents. My ankles are swelling from the sulfuric acid in these streets. And if I'm going to be underpaid anyway, then why not take my coins to the Mexico that houses the canal, or one of the Mexicos the Orinoco runs through? I'll set up shop in any Mexico that will have me, so long as I can weep on plots of earth that can say, I'm so proud of you, mijo. So ship me to Ana Cristina Cesar's Mexico that also longs for the perhaps. Box me up and leave me in Vallejo's Mexico with its startling volcanoes of repentance. Give me all the Mexicos of the hemisphere, pistol whipped by united fruit and still making wisecracks. I'll take root in any Mexico that knows the difference between the gutter and the stars. Thank you, everybody. So we are kind of done with the poetry part. Cora, I don't know.
Thank you, Vincent, Ruben, Grisel. I am truly moved, and I wish we could stay and have a drink in person and celebrate. Yeah, as you talked about the political change. I don't know if anyone has a question, a comment, wants to share some words too.
If I may say something, Cora,
yes.
It's a pleasure to meet you.
Yeah.
Your work is incredible.
Incredible.
I love the Mexican, the 3 Mexicos poetry. I am Mexican myself, so I can imagine the reaction of listening to this, confusing way of describing, the several aspects of what Mexico is. And I love the video. And the use of that portions of images from the 50s and then more modern is just incredible. So wonderful. And of course, I do love the remembrance to your father, Grisel. I think it was a wonderful poem. So it's been wonderful. I agree with Cora. I hope we work together and then have a drink, or in a nice meal in a restaurant. But unfortunately, the pandemic has changed that. Nevertheless, in the name of the other organizers, I want to invite you again.
Absolutely.
I think we want you back.
Yes.
For a longer period, it's been wonderful to meet you and to listen to your artwork. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I hope we see you in person very soon. And that's what I wanted to ask Vincent, because of the virtual tertulias. And I just wanted to know, how is that working out in the pandemic? How has your work changed, the 3 of you, during this pandemic? And the virtual tertulias, I'm curious to know. Sure. For example, I feel like I'm almost there with the 3 of you, and I've been very moved, even though we are virtual. So
Yeah, I'll open up. I'll talk about the tertulia and where my work's at, and then I'll let Ruben and Grisel respond to like how their work has changed during the pandemic. So that I think that we think this is our third tertulia. I hope to do more. I had originally planned like almost one a month during the first year of my book being out. My book came out right at the height of the pandemic, so I don't think we're going to get to 12 of them, but this is the third. Hopefully, we'll do a couple more. But the reception we've gotten has been amazing, and I think part of that has to do. I like to think part of it has to do with the amazing poets I bring together.
yes, absolutely.
But I do think that a big part of it is just people's need for community right now. We all feel so isolated that I think, I was very nervous about it. I'm not a very camera friendly person. I come from theater. And so I didn't know how this was going to go over. But so I was really surprised to see how into it people get when we do the tertulias online. As for my work currently, I just did another thing 2 weeks ago, I think, or a week and a half ago, where I mentioned this. And I was quite honest that my creativity has flatlined during the pandemic. I know some people have they've had a surge because they've had alone time and they've been able to woodshed. It's been very difficult for me to be creative in the last year. But what I will say about the pandemic is that I'm at a point where I'm starting to even rethink my own creative processes and the circumstances under which I was able to create before, because they're not there for me. I'm again a theater-based person. Even as a poet, my work's very collaborative. I get inspired writing in cafes and being in theaters or being in classrooms. So if anything, it's pushing me to find a new context to be creative for my work. Grisel, Ruben, how is the
Grisel, how is it?
Yeah, so this has been a very interesting year because the pandemic started when I was teaching at CUNY about a year ago. And all of a sudden everything went online, and that was really challenging for the students. And that's really kind of where I was coming at it from. But then my year just took this incredibly creative turn, and I found myself on several panels to award monies to writers, and I found myself able to actually submit my book to a few places, and it got this finalist prize, and it's going to be published this month. So that was actually very shocking to me, and I think that while everyone was kind of having really just a hard time adjusting. I mean, I was, of course, as well. We were all having a hard time adjusting, mainly because we were losing our friends and family. But in terms of the isolation, I think I was having an easier time just because I was concentrating on the book, and I was so busy that took my mind off of not being able to see my friends and family as often. And I'm a bit of a recluse at times anyway. I'm an ambivert, so I like to do these events, but when after this happens, I will just be alone for a while and calm down and everything, and that's just kind of my vibe. So it's actually been a really productive time for me, and I have to thank everyone out there who has jumped onto Zoom meetings and learned how to use all the different interfaces. I had to expand my social media world, which is still really, really awkward for me. But it's actually worked for me in that respect. Now I'm currently on sabbatical, so that has helped. And I'll be teaching again in the fall. I do worry mainly about my students who really do need a lot of support, and to have an entirely online semester, I really, really feel for our students. A lot of them have kids and they have their Zoom classes at the same time. So that's really where I'm coming from in terms of that. I'm very thankful to be here. I'm thankful we're all here. I'm thankful we're all alive more than anything. That's how I feel.
And thank you so much. I think your work, the three of you are helping us today. with your inspiration and your talent. Really, I feel inspired, and the students' writings too. Ruben?
I want to echo a little bit of what has already been said. I too have had a difficult time being creative, but I've always been drawn to technology, and as you saw in that
Yes.
video, it's a great opportunity for me to really kind of harness those skills that I have and try to find a way to complement my own interest in poetry. And so last year felt like it never happened. It's such a blur. And I too, I've been craving community. So at the start of the year, I started a Zoom reading series because I really wanted to connect with other writers. I just missed being around people, and so it's been a difficult year, but it feels like this has been a respite to all the bad stuff that's happened. So I'm really happy that we have this technology available and we can be with each other in this way.
Thank you.
And I'm going to help you promote, Ruben. So I'm putting the link for your Mercy Street readings in the chat. I also put links for books to purchase from all the poets too, if you'll check the chat. But his Ruben's reading series is great. If you want community, he really brings together some wonderful poets.
Yeah, I would like to share it with our students at NJCU. Beyond this colloquium, obviously, we would love to keep working together. Maybe some of our students will also join you in the future, or faculty. So anybody else has a question or a comment?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank all three of you. Your work is amazing, and your voices are so different and yet complementary at the same time. And I really loved it. I have a question for Grisel. How did you come up with that Spain as a baby idea? Because once you've said it, I can never unthink it. And there's really so much truth to that. So how did that come to you? I want to know.
Well, it's interesting. So Vincent and I were actually at a residency in Spain with several other poets who we know. And there was a lot going on at the time. So first of all, it was amazing to be in Spain for, I believe it was 3 weeks we were there.
It was a little less than a month. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was amazing, first of all. And I'm very, very grateful. At the same time, the actual space that we were staying in was rustic, like very, very rustic. And I started kind of noticing a lot of things in terms of class. And I noticed that the residency itself was seen as a bit of an intrusion by the locals. And I felt really, really bad about that. So I just started thinking about the dynamic in general, like, well, wow, I'm the American now coming into Spain and invading a space and making the locals maybe, I mean, I hope I wasn't personally, but I know that our presence there made some of the locals feel I don't know, like we were just kind of there taking advantage of the space and not really getting to know the local people, which I think that the residency folks tried to change that with community events, but even so, that's an uncomfortable situation. So I started thinking about that, the history behind it, and how Neruda has this incredible poem about Spain coming into the Americas and everything that they took, but then also everything that they left in terms of language. And he just has this, the poem is gorgeous. I'm not going to remember the exact name right now, but so I just started thinking of that strange dynamic, like, well, who invaded who exactly here? Who's invading who? And who's giving birth to what? Did they give us everything, or did we give them everything? And I just, yeah, so I just tried to explore it in a poem, and that was kind of the seed for it.
And now Spain, again, seems like a baby. No vaccination, and they are, filling the baby. So I think your poem was very, very actual to what's going on. My family lives there. Can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely. And
Yeah.
another work that I think of when I, that I was thinking of when I wrote that poem was Open Veins of Latin America, which again talks about the same thing. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Grisel. What a pleasure. We have a few more minutes. Anyone else wants to ask anything or comment?
Can you hear me, guys?
Yeah.
So I want to talk about the poem about Puerto Rico that I believe it was Basin who was reciting the poem. So I feel very connected to that poem when you were mentioning the places, like when you mentioned Joyuda, when you mentioned Toro Verde, all that places remind me when I was in Puerto Rico. So I feel very grateful when you were mentioning all that places, and I remember when I was over there, all the experiences that I had in Puerto Rico, little that. So thank you for reciting that poem.
You're welcome. I wrote it to try to evoke the feeling that island gives me, but also to try to capture. I'm very interested in history in general, but to capture the history, we were driving through Puerto Rico, my wife and I noticed that the roads are like a labyrinto,
Yeah.
And how the island's history and the colonial history and the history of like the indigenous folks and the Africans, the Europeans, it just the roads just felt like a perfect metaphor for that entire history and the surprises that this tiny little island offers. Some are beautiful, some are painful, a little surreal. I wanted to capture that too, like the island itself as a surrealist poem.
Thank you. What a pleasure. Anyone else? Have you ever been to the New Yorican Poets Cafe? I used to take my students before the pandemic every year in spring, and they would come back home at 1 a.m. So I would have to tell them, tell your parents or your partners we're coming back at 1 a.m. And it was the best night of the year for us and the students. And I hope we can meet you there one time. It was the students were amazed by the talent in it's very late at night. So I had to bring students back in my car at 1 a.m. to Jersey City.
I just quickly will say, I think I would like to hear, Grisel wants Ruben to talk about something. It's in the chat bar, but I'll quickly say that I got my start at the New Yorican when I was 18 years old. And one of my earliest mentors was Miguel Lagarin, the founder of the New Yorican. So much of my poetic trajectory, like that, and that's why I had my book party for my first poetry book at the New Yorican. That's another home for me. But I know there's not a lot of time, and I think Grisel wants to hear Ruben talk about experimental and multi-genre poetics before we close out. If you can do that in 2 minutes.
Oh, please. I would love to, we would all love to hear you.
Sure. I mean, it's it's interesting. I don't consider what I'm doing to be experimental. I mean, it's not an experimental thing to me, but I understand what you're asking. I think that what I do was really born out of a more traditional form, which is ekphrastic writing, right? So writing in response to artwork, and so that was looking at ekphrastic as a form of translation or adaptation, and then I just kind of pushed those boundaries and included video and sound.
That's great.
I loved it. And Maria, would you like to just say a few more words since we lost, like we missed you?
I'll just say I'm so glad. And if you do nothing else, please get one of these people's amazing books. Like, think
well,
about
the
all
center will
astronauts
get them all.
sending.
The center will get them all. Right, David? And hopefully we will also teach them in our classes.
Yes. I love it.
I do classroom visits, just so everyone knows. I think the other poets do too. So
Yeah.
if you're teaching the books, we
we're
will
in. We're in.
Yeah, Vincent did a reading a couple years ago for us, and it was great. Yeah, it's so
That's
great.
right. Yeah. And you know, I know we're closing. I'm glad you brought that up, David, because I just wanted to quickly thank. I know she couldn't be with us because she's one of the people that's struggling with illness right now. But Theta Pavis is the one who brought me the first time and who helped organize this. Yeah. So I want to thank her, and I want to thank the poets who agreed to do this. Ruben, Grisel, Maria Fernanda, thank you so much for tertuliando with me today. This was great. And she couldn't make it because she had emergency, but I also just want to send shout outs and love and support to Emily Perez, who had a family emergency, and she's here with us in spirit.
Yeah, and
thank you for Theta. Theta feels better.
Yeah.
We hope that Theta gets better, yeah.
Yeah, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting her, so I was looking forward. So next time. Thank you very much. And we are right now closing up almost. The colloquium is almost over. We have a few more activities, and I'm sad to let you go because everybody will miss you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, poets. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.